Hello, and welcome to another British Cartographic Society Teatime Talk. I'm Chris Tribulus, the Teatime Talk coordinator and the host of today's talk. Today we'll have another talk in our Map Memoirs series. Today we're going to hear from David Fairbairn, Jethro Lennox, and Philip Dellar. We look forward to hearing their talks today, and so I will pass us over to David to start us off.
Thank you for coming along to this next episode in the excellent Map Memoir series produced by British Cartographic Society. I've decided to be a little bit self-indulgent by taking an approach that is allowing me to actually highlight 8 maps. So I'm doing a little bit of a desert island discs approach and presenting 8 maps that mean quite a lot to me. I've surrounded them in BCS blue on the subsequent slides. And hopefully they will raise some points of cartographic interest. Certainly they are of interest to me. If I can page down, I'm not sure if I can do that. My first introduction to maps, I suppose, is as this 8-year-old boy, as you can see in the photograph, on top of the family car, which was driven probably up to about 10,000 miles in a year where I lived in North America. And being somewhat prone to travel sickness, my father decided that I was in charge of wayfinding and navigation. And of course, what one uses when one is on a road trip in North America are these wonderful free gas company maps covering every state in a great deal of detail, sufficient for me as an 8-year-old to direct my father to various places that might have been off the beaten track for him, but certainly were of interest to me, like Craters of the Moon National Park, as we can see here in the middle of Idaho. Back home, my grandfather, who was not a geographer, but was a Scottish high school headmaster, had an interesting bookshelf with a few geographical textbooks on it, and also some atlases. And this is an extract from a 1924 atlas, historical atlas. And to me, the striking thing was the fact that multi-color lithographic printing could allow you to produce quite sophisticated design possibilities using the screens that were overlaid on top of each other. These are line screens, as you can see, rather than dot screens. But this was quite a degree of visual sophistication that was quite appealing to me. As a schoolboy, I grew up in small town Lancaster. Ideal location, as you can see from this extract from the OS 7 series map, 1-inch map of the area, an ideal location for a budding train spotter. And I've always been keen on trains, and Lancaster was a good place to pursue that hobby. This is an extract from sheet 89 of the Ordnance Survey 7 series. All school children of this era had such an Ordnance Survey 1-inch map to memorize for their geography classes at school. Now, despite the fact that the wonderful physical landscape of the Lake District was portrayed on sheet 89, of which this is an extract, our geography master actually hailed from Sussex and was obsessed by the geography of the Weald. And so we spent most of our time looking at sheet 171, Ordnance Survey 7th series. But it was interesting for a railway aficionado. As you can see here, the wonderful 40-mile long straight railway track from Redhill to Ashford, I think, going over the Weald and Clay, was a good introduction to the way in which the geology of southeast England is presented. And railways appear on my next desert island map. This is an extract from Cook's Continental Timetable of the 1970s, because one of the rites of passage of a school leaver in the early 1970s was to go interrailing in Europe with your trusty Cook's Continental timetable in your backpack. And I've just extracted a map from here. I suppose the question that's raised by this particular map is it a map or is it a diagram? And many cartographers who are more intelligent than me have spent a lot of time arguing about the difference between maps and diagrams. I'm not going to go into that here, but for what it's worth, I think that this is a map rather than a diagram, and hence it appears in my list of desert island maps, number 4 on the list. That affinity with Europe from traveling around the continent on Interrail was cemented by my postgraduate study in cartography, which was at ITC in the Netherlands. I suppose you might call it my spiritual home. It offered high quality educational provision, design and production facilities for students from all over the world. When I was there in 1977, there were 350 students from 75 different countries, and it was a fabulous environment to follow one's education in. The staff were very focused, and they did their own particular mapping. The map on the right-hand side, which I've selected as one of my desert island maps, is a land use map of the centre of Enschede, which is the city in which ITC is based. And I supplemented it on the left-hand side with another example of international cooperation, showing what I think is a very good map of Europe. This produced by a Hungarian cartographer in a facility in Belgium based on data from the European Union. And the thing that struck me about these maps was that, unlike the previous examples of my desert island maps, there's no white space on these maps. Who knew that a map didn't need to have actually white space in the background? And pleasing design and effective cartography produced to a very high standard at ITC. When I left the Netherlands to come back to the UK, my first cartographic job was with Philips, and I followed my or initiated my career at Philips, like many cartographers in this country, with map editing responsibilities under the tutelage of Harold Fullard, and several atlases. I remember a Francophone atlas of Quebec, the Hong Kong School atlas, as we can see here. And the excellent team there, with Harold retiring, I think, at the time that I was there at Philips, and the team being led then by Alan Pointer and Bill Willits and Derek Cooper in the drawing office. And we produced together with the other map editors what I consider quite an innovative atlas in 1978, the Philips Certificate Atlas for secondary schools, with a thematic map showing internal migration in the UK and commuting patterns on Tyneside and the expansion of urban growth in London. So I think that these are examples of sophisticated cartography that was part of my first job in cartographic production. When I left Philips, it was quite a significant change, because I moved to an academic environment, to the then called Department of Surveying at Newcastle University in 1978. And my job there was, in effect, to cover the end of the flow line of production that goes from geodesy to field survey to photogrammetry, and then to cartographic production. And I've characterized in the next few slides the work that was done at Newcastle in terms of cartography into decades. And the 1980s was characterized by large format topo map production. We set up a Carto repro unit with a large process camera with scribing capabilities, and we were able to produce large scale, in this case a 1 to 10,000 scale map of Chatsworth, and a 1 to 2,500 scale map of somewhere up on Deeside, where the students had done all the field work and, as you can see, involved themselves in the production as well. So this large format team effort was part of the work at Newcastle, but we could also do individual student projects, and we were able to produce high quality manual cartography up to proof stage using the facilities that we had built up at Newcastle from the 1980s onwards. One of the sidelines of this was an interest that I had in orienteering and a desire to assist a local orienteering club produce high quality mapping for orienteering events in the northeast of England. And I suppose in total, we must have produced well over 30 printed maps during the 1980s and early 90s. I need to name check my fellow orienteer, John Dixon, who actually produced the vast majority of these maps up to printed stage using conventional manual techniques. And one of my desert island maps is actually the one map that I produced amongst the 8. So this is all my own work, as you might say. This glittering stone map portrays a wonderful area up in the north of Northumberland. And with the combination of scribing and peel coat masking and text presentation and the repro facilities that we had, we were able to produce excellent orienteering maps similar to this one here. By the turn of the 90s, orienteering mapping was becoming digital. The excellent software package OCAD, which is still available and is capable of doing a lot more than just orienteering mapping. It was an example of good quality digital map production, which I got the students to do with a more generic graphics piece of software, CorelDRAW. And the students were able to produce maps similar to this. They were tasked with highlighting various tourist attractions, and they were using the facilities of CorelDRAW, but also data sets that were being readily produced for higher educational establishments from Ordnance Survey and from Bartholomew's. And by the time the new millennium came around, then obviously GIS software and the kind of facilities that were available using large pieces of software were becoming more sophisticated, and using ArcGIS and QGIS, we were able to produce student work, which I reckoned was of a fairly good quality. And into the 2010s, then the tools that were available on the web were much more sophisticated, and using open web technologies, students were able to manipulate an enormous range of data sets and supplement it with cartographic design principles to create effective web mapping outputs. Standing back from the timeline, I'd like to reflect a little bit on my cartographic journey by considering outside engagements, notably involvement with learner societies. And I would encourage any cartographer to get involved with the excellent community of cartographers that exists both in Britain and overseas. As you can see, I was a serving council member for the British Cartographic Society for a large number of years, mainly in ex officio positions as the editor of the BCS newsletter and eventually chair of the programme committee for a long time, as well as editing the journal. And the nomination from the UK Cartographic Committee to ICA was very well received by me, because it opened up the whole of the international community, where I got to meet an extraordinary range of fellow cartographers. And the listing of these people who have affected my journey through cartography is immense, and I've just done a few from A to Z. I mean, Jethro showed how you could go from government cartography to commercial cartography to self-employed cartography in a very effective way. Ken Atherton administrator extraordinaire, Chris Board, intellectual giant, Barbara Bond, the second female president of BCS, excellent leadership. All four of those have led British Cartographic Society. Pat Carmody going into the letter C, my first boss, very proud of the fact that he was a founder member of BCS membership number 007. Alan Collinson, creative inspiration behind the BCS design group in the 1980s and 90s. And there's a whole list of people all the way through to Z. Laszlo Zentai, my successor as Secretary General in ICA, fellow orienteer, probably the widest traveled person I know, Luc van Zuylen, a teacher at ITC, inspiring teacher, who used to give us lectures despite the fact that he had a day job as Deputy Director of the Dutch equivalent of Ordnance Survey, the Topographische Dienst. Van Zuylen was an interesting character in the sense that he didn't scotch the rumor going around the student body at that time that he used to play first team football for Ajax in Amsterdam. So these are inspirational figures that have helped me along my cartographic journey, and the list could be extended by a whole host of others. The other thing to move away from the timeline to mention is the fact that in Newcastle, I was able to have a few trips away from there on sabbaticals, back to ITC in the 1980s, to Vienna this century, my favorite city in the world, but most notably to Australia, to RMIT University, where I encountered to me, the epitome of Australian cartography, the street directory. And from a cartographic point of view, one can see that this street directory is immensely detailed. It's showing an immense amount of information. And I would contend that the design choices that have been made in this street directory are such that it can reveal a very complex environment very effectively. I think the reason is that most street directories put the names of the streets actually within the band or the casing lines of the street itself, and don't leave much space for things that happen between the streets. Whereas on the Melways, the design is such that the streets are single lines, and the lettering and all the other detail is away from them. Fieldwork in Australia, as you might imagine, was very effective. I mean, I was joining a department similar to the one in Newcastle, where there was a lot of field survey activity, and we did some work on Phillip Island, which, as you might imagine, is quite an interesting environment to do one's cartography and surveying in. And for me, surveying is the bedrock, I suppose, of cartography. It's an important part in cartographic production. And although it was exciting in Australia, I couldn't leave behind the kind of things that we were doing at Newcastle, where I was able to get some further information that I didn't get at school about the physical landscape on sheet 89 of the Ordnance Survey 7th series, because our field work were in these, as you can see, the wonderful valleys of the Lake District. And this to me is part of the mapping process, and it was wonderful to be able to go and have field courses in these places where it wasn't just work, there was a bit of play involved as well, but this kind of activity is certainly something that I am very keen to keep involved in. And to me, it provides an integral part of the whole process of surveying and mapping. This particular video was shot by an ex-colleague of mine, James Goodyear, and shows the students enjoying their time in the Lake District, probably as much as the staff, and ending up with mapping at a large scale, topographic mapping at a large scale of a Lake District valley. My final map is one that abides by the desert island disc tradition, because it needs to be a reminder of home, and I've lived on the border, within the borders of this particular map for the last 45 years. It is an interesting map because it is a folded insert into what I suppose these days might be regarded as a tourist book, a brochure. It's called here the Handbook to Tynemouth, Blythe and Tyne Railway, produced in 1863. And it just reflects the area of North Tyneside, the historic, the beautiful area of North Tyneside that I happen to live in. And of course, it's an area that has given the railways to the world. And so we're back again at a map that emphasizes the railways, the collieries, the wagonways, the docks, everything that has made this area historic and prosperous. And I think that this particular map sort of stands as a useful addition to my list of desert island maps. So I'd like to finish on that point by proclaiming this one as the one that I would save from the waves, which is the question that is asked of most people who go on desert island discs. Thanks for your attention to this, and I look forward to the rest of the Map Memoir talk tonight.
Thank you very much, David, for that. That's been a very nice talk there. And yes, so to move it on quickly, I'll ask for Jethro if you're ready to present.
Okay, well, thank you very much for having me on, and thanks to David. That was fascinating. Well, I didn't know I was allowed 8, but I've stuck. Well, actually, I'll introduce 2, and then I'll say what narrowed me down. So, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Cartographic Director for HarperCollins Publishers. So, head up the Collins Maps and Atlases, Times Atlases, and the Collins Bartholomew Cartographic Data. But I'm actually not going to talk about any of our own publications. I'm going to talk about Ordnance Survey maps, partly because they had such an influence in my youth and had such an impact on my cartography. When I was very young, I had a bit of an obsession with going to trig points, and I used to basically tick off trig points and list all the trig points. And actually, once I wrote to Ordnance Survey and asked them to send me a list of all the trig points, they did write back to me and said they couldn't send me the full list of all the trig points in Scotland, but they would send me trig points within 50 kilometres of my address, which was in Lanark. Now, this for me wasn't that helpful since I'd listed them many years before, so I just continued looking at every single Ordnance Survey map and listing, and I've still got jotters listing all the trig points. I haven't yet managed to visit them all in Scotland, and I'll go on to reveal exactly why shortly, later on in the talk. But really, I just loved Ordnance Survey maps for walking. I did a little bit of orienteering when I was young, not as much. I did a bit more hill running, a bit more hill walking. So it was certainly Ordnance Survey, especially in Scotland, the 1 to 50,000 maps. And really, David was talking about the different numbers, so I was scrabbling around while he was talking, thinking of what number it was. That my favourite Land Ranger was Land Ranger 33, which I managed to just dig out during David's talk. And this one is basically where Knoydart is kind of just inland from Skye. It's hardly got any roads on it. It's just mountains. And I used to pore over these in a winter's night in Lanark, dreaming about climbing the mountains. And actually once me and my dad did a big expedition from Glenfinnan Viaduct, the famous Harry Potter viaduct, right up to Shielbridge Youth Hostel. We took 3 days to do it. And obviously the Ordnance Survey maps, especially before the time of anything digital, were absolutely valuable, were a lifesaver. You learned how to use that. This isn't my map memoir. So the map that I've chosen was an Ordnance Survey map, but it was, it's this one here, the Pathfinder. What number is it? 1373 of St Kilda or Hurta. Now, I looked at this, and it's 1991, so I must have bought it when I was mid-teens. I must have bought it maybe possibly about 12, 13. I was obviously trying to research different maps. I've always had a fascination with St Kilda. I'll say exactly where it is in a minute. For those who don't know, most of you'll know where it is. But you can straight away see from the front of the map, if on the front, this is the kind of traditional map, it's got 1373 is St Kilda. Now in the Western Isles, Tarrency, which was featured on Castaway, is map number 98. Harris is 107. So already you can tell this place is quite unique, because obviously when Ordnance Survey were created, Pathfinder series, they obviously go north to south, start at 1 up in the north of Scotland. But St Kilda got missed out. So already you can look at this map and say, well, look, there's something going on here that makes this map pretty interesting. Now, why is that? I will just attempt to share my screen. Hang on, here we go. So I thought I'd better get one of our maps in, not just show Ordnance Survey maps all the time. So this is from the Times Comprehensive Atlas of the World. So I thought I'd pull up the Scotland map. And no, St Kilda will be on the Scotland map because it's in Scotland. And actually, it's so far out, you can see it's on an inset map. It's like Shetlands, although no one in St Kilda, I think, has yet petitioned to have St Kilda always shown as part of Scotland. So it's so far out that you have to go to the Britain plate, to show where it is. So it's essentially a tiny archipelago that is basically about the same distance away. So if you see Skye there, you've got Outer Hebrides here, and then you've got another, it's about 63 kilometres from the nearest point on Harris. So it's again that far out. So it's this really remote place. And this, as the answer, always fascinated me, where this place was, what was the history behind it. And so that was why, like, the map, the kind of map really kind of drew to me, and I went and I bought this map and used to fascinate over it. Also, when I was really young, I used to draw little imaginary islands, a bit like people would draw houses, and I'm sure quite a lot of people on this call did this when they were young. You drew little maps as imaginary islands as a kid. And I mean, the St Kilda map itself, I'll just go down to it. I mean, you'd be hard pushed to draw that as a kid in your imagination. I mean, the cliffs are, hundreds of meters high. Those contours, I'd obviously got to know what contours meant by doing a lot of hill walking in Scotland. And I could only imagine like what it was like to go out there and visit it. And it just felt like such a wild, remote and interesting place. And the fact that people lived there since 1930 and, survived out there pretty much on fish and birds' eggs and, and different birds. And they survived, and the community survived out there for so long, always was a great fascination for me. So I think that's why I was drawn to this map. And then obviously it then moved on where, I kept going to trig points. I moved abroad a bit. I went, as some of you know, I went to Oxford Brookes University, and so wasn't in Scotland as much, wasn't really ticking trig points off as much as I might have been, and other things get in the way in life. But I did. I moved back up to Scotland when I got a job for HarperCollins as cartographic editor, and started going to some trig points and visiting them a little bit, and still had this arching desire to go to St Kilda and visit St Kilda and walk up the hill and just explore the place. And so when I've been in Scotland about 10 years, so in 2011 we were on our honeymoon. We had me and my new wife got a camper van, and we hired a camper van, and we're touring down the outer Hebrides. Fortunately, she's quite adventurous as well. And so we found out that there was a local trip. There was a local sort of speedboat / passenger ferry it was a small motorboat that would go out when the weather was good, just that, and it would literally just go straight out. You'd have a few hours on the island. It would tour around the stacks and then come back. And because it was our honeymoon, thought, oh, this is a great opportunity. So obviously we booked in, no surprise, couldn't go the first day. Because it was a honeymoon, we weren't in a massive rush. I think we were doing the whole thing in 2 weeks down the Western Isles. So we hung around for a day or two, and eventually the weather window came, and we managed to get on a boat and go out. And amazingly, I'm normally really seasick. I once was on an expedition out in Belize, and I got horrendously seasick, and everyone on the boat, I got so seasick that the first aiders on the boat had to give me, the doctors on the boat had to give me injections to sort of get me back to some sort of normality. But actually this time, everyone else, I think maybe apart from my wife and me, weren't seasick. I think I was so excited going there, and I was just looking at this tiny speck in the distance, and it was just one of these magical days. And St Kilda was, I wouldn't say the weather was amazing, I don't think it ever is, but it was clear. It was, and we got across there, and we got a few hours on the mainland. And what happened was we then, you can see here, you can look around the old village, and it's owned by the National Trust. And so we looked around that, and we walked up, and I obviously wanted to go to the trig point and go to the highest point. But we started going up, and me and my wife, and suddenly we got about 2/3 of the way up. I think we got up this Mulloch Moor, we got up to about here. And these massive skewers started dive bombing us. And I mean, I was like, oh, let's just get to the top, it'll be fine. But my wife was, although she's adventurous, I think she kind of put a stop to like being taken out by skewers on her honeymoon. So I did retreat. So actually, I didn't actually get to the trig point on St Kilda. But I think maybe my lesson is, my marriage and partnership and other things in life are a bit more important. So we retreated. But apart from that, it was an amazing day. And then we did a tour around the stacks where the gannets were dive bombing the boat. I've never seen so many gannets around a boat and just dive bombing, and just having a look at the gannets around the other stacks. And so toured around there and came back. So, and I think what I would love to do is eventually take my two daughters out. There's a National Trust working party that goes out there, and you can spend a week there. My cousin's done that, so she's spent a week in there. That's the other people who can go out and visit the islands and just do some work out there. So hopefully sometime in the next few years we'll get on a working trip out there, and that should be quite special. So yeah, that's partly a special map, special place. So that's my Map Memoir. Yeah, Pathfinder 1373. I don't know whether it's the very last Pathfinder, might not be, but anyway, it's so very remote spots of Scotland, and very special if anyone ever gets there or has been there. So that is me.
Okay, no, thank you very much for that. That's been a very interesting talk. Nice, and lots of nice stories again. I'd just like to pass us over to our last speaker. So I will hand over to Phil for his Map Memoir.
Thank you very much. I will share my screen. It was disabled. Now here we should be good to go. So firstly, thank you for inviting me to come and share with you my Map Memoirs. I'm going to tell you a little bit about why I've ended up working for 30 years, nearly almost, in what is I suppose the geospatial data industry, and that's covered quite a broad term these days. But I'm not going to give you a series of different maps that showed me where to go, but what I would refer to as some light bulb moments that sort of took me into this path. And I'm going to start, hopefully this works, if I click through my PowerPoint, it should click onto the next one. Why is it not progressing for some reason? There we go. You can see that. You can see a well-known figure, I'm hoping. And why are you thinking, am I showing you a picture of Prince Philip? Well, he has another name, or did have another name. He is the Duke of Edinburgh, of which you may be thinking, okay, well, I know what we're talking about. We're talking about an event, several events that took place in my life, certainly, the Duke of Edinburgh's Award, of which I have achieved, thank you, the bronze, silver and gold award. Now, my Map Memoirs focus on a particular time during the gold phase of the Duke of Edinburgh's Award, which is what the little journey I wanted to take you on today, if you'll allow me. So it starts, there's a crossover here to Jethro's talk with what we all know and love as being an Ordnance Survey map. And if I take you to this screen, I have two also old maps that I still keep and maintain. These are Ordnance Survey Leisure 17 and 16 of Snowdonia. And I've got a Brecon Beacons one, and I've got a few more hundred. But clearly I was fascinated by these maps when it came to planning our route in our designated groups that we were organised into to go and do our expedition. The first stage of your expedition is to plan your route. And I liked it so much, I bought my own copies of the maps, and I've even written on them, as you can see. And on the 10th to the 13th of July 1991 was the date of our expedition. I've no way I'd have remembered that. Luckily, I wrote it on top of the map. And these two maps we used to plan our entire 3 days, I recall, around Snowdonia. And I was fascinated by that. I mean, by this time, I'd done bronze and done silver. So we'd got familiar with doing this. And geography was a subject I was very interested in. Although when you're that age doing geography at school, they don't really teach you too much about cartography. But I started to explore this a little bit more, and linked with my love of being outdoors and exploring, combining that with the Duke of Edinburgh's award, getting to sort of play with maps, I started to go, wow, this is really interesting. And if I move on to the next screen, hopefully you can see this. I've just taken literally some photographs of the inside of some of these maps because I've drawn on the route, and just to help highlight them, I've digitized them as well, just using the freehand tool inside my PowerPoint just to highlight the routes. But I've actually drawn on these where we started our expedition from, which was Coed Moor, which was my school was fortunate enough to own a small cottage in the Welsh countryside near Betws y Coed, and that would be our base, and we would head off from there. Now, this light bulb moment I mentioned, this is what came to me when drawing this route on. It was interesting, yes, and I was fascinated by that, and it was great fun exercise. But actually heading out and walking, and if you can see where I'm referring to in this path, I have even today, I have got this vivid memory in my head of me with my map in my map case, navigating. I've got my compass, I'm walking along this path, and I'm orientating the map as I'm walking, like a bit like your car sat nav does today. If you've got it on north up, it will spin round in front of you. I was doing that as I was walking around the path, going, this is really, this is true, this is real, this isn't, how did they do that? How did the Ordnance Survey, that clever organisation, didn't really know much about it at the time, get this so detailed and so correct? And I remember coming to a junction, I'm going to assume it was this one for the sake of this talk, and go, well, I know I haven't got to go down there, but I should see another track. I can see that track, and I can see this track down here, but I know I've got to take that smaller path that way, and I'm going to be going past this body of water. And it kind of blew my mind a little bit that this level of detail was available on a paper map that cost whatever it cost at the time, about £4 or something, £3, I would imagine. And it's still maintained and obviously done today. So for the rest of that expedition, I was given the role of navigator. In fact, by the end of this expedition, I was known as Phil the Map. And even today, I am still known as by my friends, and some of them I'm still in contact with, the people that I did this expedition with, and all the way through university, which we'll talk about in a minute. I was known as Phil Map. In fact, I'm going on holiday next week with some friends to the Lake District, and they've just said, right, we're going here. Phil the Map will plan the route of how to get there and where we're going to go. Let's hope he remembers where the pubs are, and we can plan that on the route as well. So it's stuck with me all of these years later. Phil the Map will plan the route and will be fascinated by the route. So going forward, I completed this exercise and came to our finish. I'd even written finish on my map, as you can see here. And we completed our expedition to do with the Duke of Edinburgh's award, and that contributed towards my gold achievement, which is fantastic. Well, now, Duke of Edinburgh's award is a bit more than just doing an expedition. I'm sure some of you have been involved, even completed it, or even run sessions on it, or sponsoring other people getting involved. But there's a service section and a skill section you have to complete as well. So there's quite a dedication you need to do in time and effort. So I, having got to grips with this love of geography, love of being outdoors, discovered that I liked maps. I'm a bit of an art fan as well, and these are pieces of art. And I wanted to explore that a bit further. So my next map memoir is my own, which is not this. It's based on this. This is the village that I grew up in North Essex. I live just down here on the outside of the village, about a mile outside in a little farm. But this was my village. Here's my village hall, and the pub was in the corner here somewhere. And I took this extract. This is a modern day extract because I didn't have time to find my original one, but this is a modern day extract. And I looked at that and said, okay, for my skill, I'm going to recreate this and learn how it's compiled. And now I had no idea how this was going to work or if it was going to be successful in any way whatsoever. So I contacted my Duke of Edinburgh Centre and said, look, okay, this is what I'm trying to do. What facilities can you put me up with and how can I get involved? And after a series of going down some dead ends and coming back again, I was able to source some material and some software, some rudimentary software. Coral Draw was mentioned earlier in the talk. I think that was one of the packages that I was using. And I started off by creating a hand-drawn version of this by looking at different sources of other information and going out and doing some survey work. And this is my second map memoir, if you take the Ordnance Survey ones as the first. My own hand-drawn, created, surveyed map of the village of Good Easter in North Essex. And I was really pleased with this. I mean, it took me quite a while to get this right and learnt some techniques along the way of doing it. For those of you that are in the know, this is almost UK map version 1, but we'll come back to that maybe another time. But it didn't stop here because I thought, okay, I've got this wonderful hand-drawn map. I think it's wonderful. You can critique it, that's fine. And I wanted to understand a little bit more. What's the next step? And for my skill, for my Duke of Edinburgh Award, creating this was interesting, but it could go more. And I was encouraged to explore that a little bit further. So I took the in my head of, well, how do I turn that? How could I recreate it? How could I maintain it if I needed to? So again, went back to my center and worked out that actually in the way that we were thinking about it, it kind of breaks it down into 4 layers of different colored layers. And it was explained to me that if I take cyan, magenta, yellow and black and overlay them on top of each other, then you can create them and manage them that way. So I took and created a transparency layer of cyan, magenta, yellow and black as 4 different acetate sheets, which I've still got in my shelf behind me sitting here, which I was able to scan them for the purposes of this, which allowed me to recreate it. And using things like Coral Draw and a few other rudimentary packages that I was able to get access to, I was able to create the digital version of my hand-drawn map. So there's my map memoir, the same map, but in digital form. So I completed this skill now of learning how to compile maps, the cartographic element of the map, but also the map production component of it as well. And subsequently, off the back of that, I've achieved the gold standard in my Duke of Edinburgh Award, and I found all my certificates while looking. So I thought I'd put them on there. So that's my journey that I wanted to share with you. And then from that, that's been my springboard. I've continued that theme going forward. I went off to university and done a degree in mapping science, and I've had a career working in the geospatial industry for 30 years. I'm now the geospatial data products strategy manager for a big global reinsurance company. So reinsurance got nothing to do with cartography or mapping, but it's a typical example of an organization that all organizations are using data. And my role today is to help them understand what's the best data, what's the right fitness, the best in class, the best fit data for the purposes that they need. So I now am in a position where I get to play with different data and evaluate it and test it and recommend it and provide a bit of thought leadership into some of the teams around how they're using it. And it all started with my maps that I've pulled out, summarized here on my final slide as my trigger moments, those light bulb moments that made me go, wow, that's amazing. How did they do that? That's fascinating. I want to figure out how to do that. I'll create something. I'll take it to the next step and take it digital and go for it that way. And that's my journey. I'm hoping I'm going to leave it on that slide there. Short and sweet, I know, but hopefully that gives you a bit of an insight into why I ended up in the career that I've ended up in.
Right. Thank you very much, Phil, for that. That's been a very another interesting talk there. Nice, nice story there. Obviously, we've had a lot of nice stories from across everyone there. It's been so. I think we'll now move on to the Q&A section of today. So As usual, if anyone has any questions, if you can please put them in the chat, and we'll work our way through them. As I can see, we've already got a number of questions that have come into the chat, and the first one's actually for Jethro. The question is, do you still hope to visit the trig point on St Kilda?
Yeah, I'd hope so. I mean, as I mentioned at the end, I'd hope to go back on the working holiday I'd love to take my two daughters there on the National Trust working holiday. So that gives us a whole week where we can, climb the 400 meters up to top. You would hope that the weather and wildlife would allow us to get there. Whether or not the trig point will be there is a matter, because as most of you know, I mean, a lot of these trig points are getting hit by lightning and destroyed or weathered, and they're not necessarily getting, there's a small number that are still maintained by Ordnance Survey, but I don't know whether this is one of the key ones. But yeah, hopefully one day that would be nice. Yeah.
No, I've seen quite a few trig points, especially in Scotland. I think they suffer quite a lot, and with the elements, especially on the west coast of Scotland, I find. Okay. Yes, and so basically we've got one for Jethro and Phil. It's yes, it's just the fact that have shown why we need to make sure children are introduced to OS paper maps and not just Digimap. Have you anything to add?
So, I mean, the one thing I would add to that, actually, I didn't mention or talk about the third component of the Duke of Edinburgh's award, which is the service bit. My service that I provided with something you have to do back to the community. Some people worked in libraries or cleaned windows, whatever. I went and volunteered at my local, what was then my scout group or cub pack, and was introducing the cubs and the young scouts to paper maps and map reading skills. That's evolved and stayed with me for many years, and it's something we continue to do as almost as a family. My son has been through the same process, now 22-year-old man. He is was a young leader until he went to university at the same scout group and teaches map reading. And it's something that I think is invaluable and should be continued to be supported as much as you possibly can do.
Yeah, and I mean, David touched on the orienteering. I did a bit of orienteering when I was young. Didn't quite get into it as much, but some of the kids groups that I do a junior hill running group in Glasgow, and I introduce probably one session term in orienteering, and so at least they all get a physical map that they're going around the park, looking at it, and using it. So I think any opportunity that you can do to actually give them a physical map and say that's what you're using out and about, the better, and they try and learn from it. So yeah, I think it's very valuable skill to learn.
Yes, it's a valuable set of skills. I'm remembering my when not being taught how to look at maps by my father, who was a geography principal. I also remember at the local country park where we were being taught about map reading. So it was a interesting set of skills there. And I have to say, David, when you mentioned the atlas at the beginning, I was initially thinking, do I have that in the house here? And I think it was actually the secondary school atlas which we have. I think that was so. I was hoping to have that on screen. I was hoping to have yours on screen, but no, I wish that was just unavailable at that second.
Yeah, the certificate atlas was, I think, a fairly new launch by Philips at that time, and I was very impressed by what we were able to produce in that team. Obviously, Philips have had many years of experience of doing school atlases focused on particular curricula from around the world, the certificate atlas was the next one in the list. And, yeah, it's to my mind, it was. I mean, it was new cartography. I mean, a lot of Phillips atlases used sort of stock maps from previous atlases, but this one was brand new, and that's why I tried to name check the chap who was in charge of the drawing office, because you know, they were the main drivers of making sure that this was a good quality product. Obviously, in atlas production, you've got the map editors and you've got the people who actually manually created the map in those days. And they were two separate responsibilities within an organization like Phillips. But it was a collaborative effort to get a good quality product out.
No, it's always interesting. It's always interesting for everyone to hear behind the scenes of how this how some of these products all come together and how they're released. Okay, so yes. So another question we have, Phil. As an artist studying GIS, I'm excited to hear you say that maps are art. Do you ever create hand-drawn or art maps these days?
The problem with that is I ran out of talent when it came to art quite quickly. So I surround myself by other people's maps. I mean, you can't really see on the wall here, there's a massive aerial photo of London, and I've got an historical map of London over there. There's more on the walls behind me, and other places as well. So I don't create my own work as such anymore now. I would love to be able to say that what I can do is worthy of hanging on the wall, but I fear it's not. But I encourage anyone to have a go.
No, I can see some of the next questions we have are well, things are quite good. It's covering the fact that we've from Jackie Bond. It's both agreeing on about the teaching of maps. So we've got the totally agree. Both girl guiding and scouting need people to teach them good mapping skills so that they can confidently enjoy the countryside, which is an important one. I think we've come across that quite a bit now in this across these talks and well across the talks and just today. And I think we need to. It's a useful area. And another one we have is scouting and Duke of Edinburgh is great for getting youngsters to use paper maps. But how do we get people to study and join the profession, which is the next story, which obviously we see that some people will naturally float into the profession and it becomes substantially more.
I think getting people involved at the youngest age as possible is try and sow the seed, like I had the light bulb moment probably.
Yes, I mean, I think that the Restless Earth sessions that are presented by BCS are invaluable in ensuring that youngsters are exposed to this kind of thing, because as you say, I think the majority of people in cartography almost fall into it accidentally, or through those kind of activities that Phil has been talking about. But if you can get people in a formal classroom situation looking at maps, the Restless Earth does, you know, I think it's vital that kind of thing is maintained.
I think further on down, it's trying to encourage some of the GIS courses to incorporate cartography into their work. I think there's a lot of GIS people who are interested in geography, and to see how that strong link is, and increasingly with data, we have a need within HarperCollins for that link between GIS people and you know, cartographers, and that line is getting more hazy. So I do think there's people out there who are in the GIS wider sphere, but it's just how to get them think that they're a cartographer, because they are, and even thinking more about the final map, the final design, all these more detailed things that they might not be when they're just looking at GIS data. So yeah, I mean, I've just advertised for a GIS cartography job, and we've got lots more applicants than I would for a cartography job. So there are more out there in it, but they are interested in doing cartography as well, and that's partly why they're applying for job articles, because they want that mixture as well. So yeah, I think there are people out there that's just trying to make them realize that and bring them into the profession.
I think we've feeling quite a tone from a lot of the comments that we're getting, a lot of the questions we're getting in now. We'll try and go through and link a few of them together, and so this is from Seppi. It's we always talk about what a global leader OS has been over the decades, and these talks show how important having great access to topo maps is. Are we in danger of losing some of the enthusiasm as we're becoming more screen-based?
Possibly. Whether we're losing the enthusiasm, maybe you could argue that the enthusiasm is increased because, so I've got in my iPhone with the Ordnance Survey app on it, and you can see it with the map of Easter on that I took a screenshot from to do this presentation. It's in our hands, so we can use it easier. That's the challenge, and people don't necessarily realize that they're using geospatial data. It's a commodity in their hand that makes it very easy to use. So we perhaps as an industry have got to be able to recognize
You're breaking up a little bit.
The difference between those people that are just using it to get here from here to those that want to be. Did you lose me a bit?
Yeah, we just lost you a little bit in the middle there.
I think a lot of the access to topo maps for young people is not just DOE and orienteering, but outdoor activity centres. I mean, Phil was saying that his school had a cottage up in Snowdonia where presumably people were introduced to topo mapping. And of course, local education authorities don't have these kind of outdoor education centres anymore. And so people are not getting the opportunity, I don't think, as young teenagers to actually engage with maps and to see how they relate to the landscape, which is what Phil was talking about right from the beginning of his DOE. It was that interaction between the map on the piece of paper and the landscape as experienced by him. That was the thing that really, as you say, it was a light bulb moment.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely a worry. It's good that Ordnance Survey still have a requirement to publish 1 to 25,000 map of the whole of the country. As you'll notice, some of you know they recently increased the prices on the Land Ranger series and the series, so they're still doing it, but all in prices have increased, which means that if anything is going to increase the sales of the digital ones, because there's a map for $12.99 in paper when you can actually get a monthly or a couple of months subscription for that price and get all the maps of Britain for that price. So, you know, there is a balance. I think at least the maps have been produced. You can walk into a visitor centre in the north of Scotland and pick up a map and look through it and buy one. So they're still accessible and out there, even though the prices have gone up for them. So I think it is an area to be worried that if they start reducing the range and not doing as many paper maps or just doing print on demand, which would be even more expensive. But I think we just have to, you know, at least the data that they then serve digitally is just as good and is up to date and accurate. And so that I think we can still be as enthusiastic about the maps on a mobile phone as on a piece of paper.
And data is the key to it. In maintaining the data that feeds into these maps is critical. So, I mean, in my world, it's really interesting. Having joined the business that I'm in, it was nearly 2 years ago now, an insurance company. I'm talking to people about data, and they go, "Oh, you're from the geospatial industry. That's all to do with satellites." I go, "No, your data is also geospatial data." And I go, "No, it's just a spreadsheet." Yes, but it's got a coordinate in it that says where something is happening. So it's, look, let me show it to you graphically. And they go, "Wow, I didn't realize you could do that." it didn't realize this was geospatial data. So and there's all sorts of users across all sorts of industries of people using data that don't realize it has a geospatial content of it. And then once they start to visualize it inside a QGIS platform or wherever, or a ArcGIS platform, then they change the way they look at it. And they start to understand the visualization side of it is as important as the data itself, because it's all how about that message is sent over. So that's been really interesting for me, coming into a world of very smart people who know their products and know their worlds inside out, but hadn't made that connection. But majority of data that's out there is geospatial because it has a reference somehow.
Okay. Yes. So I think we've now. I've got just a comment. Just a comment that looks like that Jim's going to see what he can dig out about Pathfinder 1373 when he's back, when he's in the office next week. I can see that Jethro has already seen that message, and so I have to say, yes, it's just a glance at the final few comments before we finish up. It's just the fact of maps are art, but also a blend of the environment around us and the history. They are so informative and great talks from everyone. I think that proved from many cases from throughout the talks we've had, and then jumping on to the then referring back to our previous comments about GIS and mapping. It's the fact of agreeing that GIS is often analysis of data, but not necessarily the final visualization, which I'd agree. If anyone's any comments there. And finally, it's the highlight of that school curriculum. Primary is the perfect place to catch children, to get them interested in maps. I think that's what we've. I think that's the early stage. I think primary is the earliest, and I think that's, as mentioned with Restless Earth, that is where we seem to be having a lot of success with people being generally very interested in mapping. From everything I hear back from them. So I have to say, thank you everyone for joining us today. I want to thank all our speakers for what have been a series of very interesting talks, quite a few maps between them. And I have to say, it's, as usual, Map Memoirs are always offering us a lot of interesting topics, a lot of interesting stories, and genuinely, it's a very good to hear what people have to say from the perspective when we're looking at maps in general. So I want to say thank you very much to all our speakers once more, and I want to thank everyone for joining us. Next month we're going to have we'll have Seppi Kapsitari, President of British Cartographic Society, giving a talk. But for today, I'd like to say thank you and goodbye.